But one of them was Blade Runner Enhanced Edition. So have you ever play the Blade Runner game from Westwood?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so it's very highly regarded. It is an adventure game. Came out in like 97, I think, or 98, and it's very cool. It was very multimedia, and you play as a Blade Runner named McCoy, who his story runs perpendicular to the story in the movie. So like you never see Deckard. He gets mentioned, but you do sort of meet characters from the film as part of your story. So like while you're doing your investigation, the investigation that's in the movie is taking place at the same time. But like you'll come across like Chu, I think the guy who created Eyes in the film. You'll run across Terrell. You speak to Terrell at one point as well. So like it's a, and it really captured the look and feel of the movie beautifully. Again, because it was all, full motion video.
Was it a PC game? Correct?
This was a PC game. Yeah. CD-ROM PC game. So it was up until a few years ago, it was notoriously hard to run on modern console or modern PCs, as a lot of games from the 90s are. Yeah. Right. So you had to jump through this ridiculous number of hoops to hopefully get something running. A few years back, a few different companies, I think, got together and actually got it running on ScumVM pretty well and actually put it up for sale on Good Old Games. But at the same time, Nightdive Studios, who we talked about earlier, had also announced that they were remastering Blade Runner and going to release it sort of, across multiple consoles and PC. So anyway, that happened this past week. I was a little bit shocked because the price is like $15, which seems really low, especially when you consider that they had to jump through a ton of hoops here for legal rights to something like this. And it almost shadow dropped. It was like, Blade Runner's out. Like there was a ton of hype for it like a year ago, and then it went quiet, and then suddenly it's like, wait, I can buy this now. When did this? There was no announcement. It felt like there was no announcement, no hype anyway.
That's a little suspicious.
Yeah. Well, for good reason. It's really not well. It's not well done. So one of the things that they were told, they used like an AI upscaler for the CGI movies, which in still screens, I guess looks good. But when you see it running, it looks very similar to like when you buy a new TV or you go to your mom's place and she has a TV and she never turned off the smoothing. She watches and I'm saying that because that's what my mother is like. She has the smoothing on for everything. And you walk in,
Tom Cruise saying that you're not supposed to.
Right.
Smoothing, yeah.
Exactly. I bet you she would though. I should tell her that he said that.
Old ladies love Tom Cruise.
They absolutely do. As soon as Top Gun came out, my mother was like, "Are you going to see Top Gun? Can you take me? I want to go see Top Gun." What can I say? But yeah, so the cinemas are like that. They look, because they're running at 60 frames per second, but they weren't 60 frame per second videos. And the other thing is of course, if you've ever seen Blade Runner, one of the draws of Blade Runner is like it's sort of this dark, gritty, 2019 future LA. Mm-hmm. It's always raining. There's smoke everywhere. Like there's, it's smoggy and everything like that. Well, the AI upscaling process kind of cleaned all that up. So it doesn't look like Blade Runner anymore. Mm-hmm. And it didn't animate that well to begin with, but now that it's been smoothed out, it feels worse. And then of course, the thing too is when you're in actual interactive scenes, it's your character's like moving over movies, like video clips that are looping for the most part. So those are still in 4:3. Those aren't at a higher frame rate. So it feels even more jarring that you're going from these 60 frame per second, 16:9 CGI videos to these 4:3. They feel really low frame rate. I don't know what they are. I feel like they're lower than they were. And then on top of that, the other thing is of course, if you think about it, the griminess and the smoke and the fog were kind of, working in tandem with video artifacts that you would have had from games back in the late 90s to blend in the interactive characters, right? Because like the interactive characters that your main character and the ones you can talk to are all built with voxels, and so like all that grime and all the artifacting kind of helped to blend them into the background, and it looked pretty natural. It doesn't look amazing by today's standards. So now, because they've smoothed everything out, it literally looks like they've just run a filter over the whole thing. The backgrounds, the interactive characters stick out like a sore thumb at all times. So it does not do the game any favors, and it's got a lot of crashing issues and a lot of control issues. I don't think it came with a digital manual. I can't find one with my copy anyway, so I have no clue what's going on as far as like shooting and things like that. So all in all, yeah, it was shadow drop because it was a mess, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the AI upscaling, just because just coincidentally, I've just started messing around with AI upscaling, although images, not videos, just because for my show, like a lot of times I'm looking for pictures of this, that, or the other thing. And a lot of times the only option you have are like these really low resolution pictures or worse, with pictures with a lot of like compression, artifacting and stuff. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I very quickly learned, I think AI upscaling can be very cool. Like I've gotten some pictures that really didn't look good where I've made them look great, but you're 100% correct that, AI upscaling makes the pictures look like too good.
Yeah.
Because, everything gets smoothed out too much. And so what I've learned is like, yeah, go ahead and AI upscale. But after that, you need to apply some effects to the picture to make it look more like, add back some film grain and stuff like that.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing. Cause I know, like, I know someone that kind of works in the, TV industry, and he says they use AI upscaling for a lot of stuff for video.
Really.
But I think that, those are people that have the resources and the know-how to say, yeah, we're going to AI upscale, but then we're going to do some other digital, processing to it so that it doesn't look like exactly what you just described.
Right. Yeah. Cause that's just it. Like the cleaning up the artifacting just made everything look too clean, and the upscaling also smoothed out a lot of places that were supposed to have texture, because again, the world's supposed to be so run down, right? It's sort of that classic sort of sci-fi look. Same thing with Star Wars, right? Where everything just looks run down, which is why the prequels look so terrible, because everything looked like it was built in a computer. Right. So it's a shame. I think it's interesting to look at it from the standpoint of, like you mentioned, film grain, because again, when Ridley Scott made that film, obviously they were using the film grain, the fact that it was going to look that way anyway, to give it a certain look. And you lose it with this, which it's a real shame. And Nightdive Studios is well known for supporting their games. So, and I know they've already come out and said they're working on a patch for like I think more for the crashes than for the visuals. But I hope that they figure out a way to make this look good, because it is a really good game. And of course, if you're a fan of the film, you're playing something that's pretty much, you could call it canon, which is great. You're visiting scenes from the film. You're actually in some of the scenes in the film as well. I always love the way they handled it, but it's a real shame that this is how this has turned out, especially for console, because there's no other way to play it on a console, right? I mean, you can play the Scum version on your PC, but otherwise, no.
Is it, you had mentioned that somebody did the Scum deal and put it up on Good Old Games. Is that one still there?
No, they delisted it.
Okay, that's what I was afraid of.
But if you buy the enhanced edition on Good Old Games, it comes with a free copy of the Scum version.
Oh, well, that's not
so. And it's not very expensive. I mean, the things, like I said, I think it was $13. Mm-hmm. So it's super cheap.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
It's not Turok cheap, but
not quite Turok cheap. And I think it's a shame too. You mentioned how the upscaling, the uprising didn't do any favors. I think it's really interesting how a lot of these older games use its limitations to its benefit. And I think
absolutely.
I think that's really, I think a lot of people, and maybe developers too, when we try to clean things up, you clean them up almost too much, and you lose that artistic intention, which was, hey, this thing's going to run at 20 frames per second, but let's make it, or have this grain and have this, let's use that to its advantage, as opposed to kind of smoothing it out.
People make the same argument, right, about playing like for instance, Sega Genesis games,
Yes.
perfect because they're, certain, like, the waterfalls in Sonic is an example that gets used a lot because like they don't look right anymore.
Right. Or, I mean, you can even go a little further than that with things like items that are meant to flash and like on CRTs where they would use sort of the image retention that's natural to a CRT. I always go back to Pac-Man on the 2600 because it's such a great example of that, where it's like, if you look at, it's a terrible game that I absolutely love, but if you look at, there are 4 ghosts on the screen, but it's actually one sprite that's hopping to the different paths, which if you're playing it on a modern on a modern display is very obvious that that's what's happening. But if you were playing it on a CRT in 1982, it looked like there were 4 ghosts there. They were flickering a little bit, but they were there. You know what I mean? So and kind of like what you were saying too, like I think back to like one of the things that I absolutely love is the fact that a lot of digital pictures, full motion video games are being remastered and re-released by Screaming Villains. I think is doing the main ones, like Prize Fighter's coming out, which I'm super stoked for because I loved Prize Fighter. But it's like I love seeing those games with without the limitations of like the Sega CD where I first played them. But do they ever not look? I'm not going to say they don't look as good, because that's a stupid way to put it. But they look like what they are. They look like they're straight to video, low budget. There's a charm with that, but it loses something with like because of the limitations that were on the hardware. You were just so amazed to be seeing what you were seeing. You didn't care about the quality of it as much as now. And when you look at it now, it's like, wow, this was somebody was just running around with a VHS camcorder the whole time, and and there are strings on everything. But anyway, but I say that again, still love that stuff. So the other big